What if I told you that the world's most valuable company, the titan that sits in your pocket, tracks your health, and defines our modern era, was once exactly 90 days away from total, irreversible extinction? We aren't talking about a rebrand, a quiet acquisition, or a minor market correction. We are talking about the complete permanent shuttering of its doors. No iPhones, no MacBooks, no Apple Watch, no App Store. Why? Because a company that once changed the world had completely forgotten who it was. By 1996, the internal culture had rotted. The stock price was a bloodbath, trading at a 12-year low. Even Michael Dell, the king of the PC industry, publicly told shareholders that if he ran Apple, he'd shut it down and give the money back to the shareholders. The board was paralyzed, and the tech world was writing the obituary. Tonight, on Icons in Flux, we are pulling back the curtain on the brutal, desperate, and borderline insane survival strategy that pulled Apple back from the grave, and why, for the first 6 months, it felt like the end was already written. In the 1970s, the computing world was a graveyard of beige boxes and cryptic commands. Then came the two Steves, Jobs and Wozniak, who turned a garage into the hub of the PC revolution. With the Apple II, they turned elite tools into household staples, and by the mid-'80s, the Macintosh became a cultural phenomenon promising the power to be your best. But as Apple ascended, corporate rot set in. After Jobs was ousted in 1985, the company lost its North Star, trading its garage startup soul for cold, unfeeling management. Under leaders like John Sculley, Apple became a victim of its own success. Treating computers like a commodity, they pushed for high 55% margins that were unsustainable as the PC market became a race to the bottom. Management failures were systemic. CEOs. Michael Spindler and Gil Amelio presided over a company that had lost its vision. Spindler engaged in desperate secret merger talks with Sun Microsystems, IBM, and Philips, failing to realize Apple's value lay in its soul, not its hardware. When Amelio took over in 1996, he inherited a disaster. The structure was a mess of 7 competing divisions, each with its own P&L, fueling internal infighting. The company became a zombie, shuffling through politics while the world moved toward Windows. Market share plummeted below 5%. The brand was viewed as a relic, and the stock traded in single digits. Shareholders were furious. The board was fractured, and Apple was bleeding talent to more agile competitors. The atmosphere inside the Infinite Loop campus was suffocating. The variety trap was in full swing. Apple offered dozens of models like the Performa, Quadra, and Centris, leaving consumers paralyzed by choice. Branding was incoherent, and engineering teams were siloed, competing against each other rather than the market. Meanwhile, Windows 95 turned PCs into user-friendly machines, stripping away Apple's primary advantage. The arrival of Mac clones, cheaper hardware running Apple's own OS, accelerated the bleeding. In 1996, Apple lost $867 million. By year's end, its market cap had plummeted to less than $3 billion. The Apple Newton became the symbol of this decline. Though innovative, its flawed handwriting recognition made it a punchline for comedians, serving as a monument to Apple's core problem: innovation without focus. The press smelled blood. The Wall Street Journal labeled it a company in freefall, while Businessweek declared the fall of an American icon. The internal culture was a powder keg. Engineers were demoralized, and the board was in terminal paralysis. With less than 90 days of liquidity remaining, the company was in a death spiral. Internal audits showed they were burning $100 million a quarter. Vendors demanded cash on delivery, and retailers pulled Macs from shelves to make room for reliable PCs. The pirate ship was taking on water, its hull breached by poor management, and the crew was already reaching for the lifeboats. By early 1997, Apple was effectively insolvent. In a desperate, last-ditch effort, the company acquired Next, bringing Steve Jobs back into the fold. Jobs returned as a consultant, but the power dynamic shifted immediately. Jobs walked into a boardroom paralyzed by failure and looked at a chaotic roadmap of dozens of underperforming projects. He slammed his hand on the table, demanded a whiteboard, and drew a simple 2x2 grid, consumer and professional columns, and desktop and portable rows. He declared that everything outside of those 4 boxes was dead. He canceled 70% of the company's products, killing the Newton, scanners, printers, and the clone program. It was a bloodbath, accompanied by 4,100 layoffs. Wired famously ran a tombstone on their cover that simply read, "Pray." Jobs wasn't just killing projects, he was amputating an infection. On August 6, 1997, he took the stage and dropped a bombshell. Microsoft was investing $150 million into Apple. While the audience booed, the deal provided the oxygen Apple needed to survive. By killing the clones and re-establishing an exclusive, high-value ecosystem, he made the ultimate gamble. A radical return to simplicity and design excellence that reconstructed the company's very DNA. The immediate aftermath was chaotic and traumatic. The stock didn't bounce back instantly. It actually dropped to around $12.75 per share shortly after Jobs took the helm, levels unseen since the mid-'80s. Suppliers were furious, investors were confused, and the staff was demoralized by the mass layoffs. The industry didn't believe Apple could survive. The prevailing sentiment was that Jobs was simply rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. But beneath the surface, the 90-day pivot had created something that hadn't existed at Apple for a decade: silence. For the first time, the entire company was working on the same 4 things. Jobs brought in Jony Ive, and they began work on the iMac. This wasn't just a design change, it was a psychological reset for the entire organization. The translucent Bondi blue casing was a direct, vibrant slap in the face to the beige box era. They removed the floppy drive, a move that was considered suicidal by tech critics because Jobs knew the future was in connectivity and USB standards, not legacy hardware. When the iMac launched, it didn't just sell, it became a cultural talisman. Within its first year, Apple sold 800,000 units, making it the fastest-selling PC in history. The Think Different campaign, originally intended as an internal morale booster, was leaked to the public, and the response was electric. It was an apology and a declaration of war all at once. Headlines shifted from Apple's deathbed to the resurrection of Jobs. The company was finally breathing again. The long-term effects of this turnaround changed global economics forever. By narrowing the focus, Apple paved the way for the digital hub strategy. If they hadn't cut the clutter, they never would have had the resources or the brand equity to build the iPod. If they hadn't mastered mobile OS integration, the iPhone would have been a fantasy. The 1997 product grid is now the standard for business school curriculum across the globe. It proved that in the age of the internet, a company's power is defined not by how much it does, but by how much it is willing to stop doing. Apple's transition from a zombie company to the world's first multi-trillion-dollar entity is a testament to the idea that true innovation requires sacrifice. In 2018, just 21 years after the 90-day death sentence, Apple crossed the $1 trillion market cap mark. Today, as of mid-2026, the company sits at a valuation exceeding $4.5 trillion, a staggering testament to its sustained dominance. This transformation ripple effect was profound. Apple's shift from a hardware manufacturer to an ecosystem-based lifestyle brand fundamentally changed the consumer psychology of technology. It turned silicon and software into symbols of personal identity, where owning an Apple device became a signal of belonging to a creative, modern elite. This model triggered a domino effect in the industry. Competitors like Google and Microsoft pivoted to prioritize their own integrated ecosystems, while the retail landscape was forever altered by the Apple Store's Town Square philosophy, which prioritized user experience over inventory volume. Apple's obsession with minimalism and frictionless interfaces became the industry gold standard, effectively forcing every player, from smartphone manufacturers to car companies, to adopt a design-first philosophy. Furthermore, the company's long-term reliance on its proprietary silicon, culminating in the M-series chips, proved that vertical integration is the ultimate competitive moat. Apple ceased to be just a tech vendor. It became a gatekeeper of the digital life. This transition redefined the rhythm of global commerce, setting the pace for annual product cycles, while its pivot to services, Apple Music, TV Plus, and iCloud, ensured recurring high-margin revenue that stabilized the company against economic cycles. Ultimately, the turnaround didn't just save a firm. It created a blueprint for how a legacy organization can maintain relevance in a hyper-fast digital era, teaching every modern CEO that the greatest threat to a company is not its competition, but its own lack of identity. By successfully managing this product grid transition, Apple not only escaped the graveyard but built a kingdom that currently commands a staggering $4.5 trillion in market value, proving that the most difficult decisions, what to stop doing, are the ones that eventually build empires. The story of Apple's resurrection is proof that even the most unstoppable giants can fall, and even the most finished companies can be reborn. But the question remains, is this level of brutal, top-down discipline even possible in today's modern corporate environment? We're going to explore that in our next deep dive, where we analyze a company that tried to pull a Jobs-style pivot, only to implode in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. If you want to see how the other side of this coin looks, make sure you're subscribed. You won't want to miss that analysis. Thanks for watching.